Good afternoon, church family. It's Monday afternoon, and we're going to have our apologetics lesson. I'm a little bit early because I have a meeting here in a little while with the finance committee, so I wanted to get this recorded and posted so that I could go on with that. And so, just wanted to give you some encouragement about the things we're talking about. Apologetics is different because it is a very nuanced kind of look at a particular kind of thinking and evangelism. And so some of the things here may not be your cup of tea. It may be boring to you even, and I get that. We're not. This isn't systematic theology or a Bible study, although we always bring it back to those things. But if you hang in there, I think you'll learn at least to think through the issues a lot, even if you were not to somehow agree with some of the things that I'm saying. I think it will at least force us to think through these issues, and that's really important. So we're going to pick up our lessons where we left off as we consider what is man. And last time we evaluated who we are as descendants of a historical Adam and Eve who were created intentionally and created uniquely and by the direct creation of God. They were historical in their life and in an actual fall event that resulted in God casting them from the garden and revealing his plan to redeem them through an actual physical descendant, and that would be Christ. And in the life and death and resurrection of Christ, is historical. It is as historical as the creation and the fall of the first Adam. So this lesson, we will answer that next question: are we alien? And of course, we can say that we've already answered the first one, and we're descendants of Adam. Then we are not aliens. But is there other intelligent life elsewhere in the cosmos, and why are we able to answer that question one way or another with any sort of confidence? Okay, so I'm going to outline kind of chapter 3, at least part of it, from the book by Dr. Edgar Andrews, What is Man, Adam, Alien, or Ape? And so I kind of have been alluding to that and leaning on that book a little bit here and there through these. And so today I'll really kind of outline at least the first part of chapter 3 for you. In chapter 3 of the book, he issues this, he gives this evaluation of whether we're aliens or whether there is such a thing as intelligent life on other places in the galaxy. And he does so kind of entertaining way. He's not lighthearted. He's not tongue-in-cheek. He is serious, but he keeps it light and fun. I don't know how light and fun I'll keep it, but I'm going to try to. He starts with this London Times headline from 2009, and the headline ran this: "Found a planet like Earth, but 5 billion years away. Best chance yet of extraterrestrial life." It was actually supposed to say that this was 500,000 light years away. Honestly, at that distance, what's the difference? Because just like it was then, it's impossible to get to. It's an impossible feat to get there. This reminds me of a conversation I had with some people who were fascinated by all the scientific advances, especially in the last 100, 200 years, and rightly so. It is very good to see those things as good things. But it becomes a bit of a stretch of imagination and type of worship of man's achievement at some point when we lean so heavily on science that we are willing not to even look at science anymore, but look at some of the conjecture that comes from the possibilities that science may do something or may find something, okay? I'm not saying that actual scientific facts are conjecture. I'm not saying that. I'm saying is taking those things and assuming things or bringing other things into it that are even possible. Sometimes that is just a stretch of imagination. So sometimes that happens in this finding intelligent life on other planets, and especially more intelligent life. Remember, most scientists that have said we actually find like beings of some kind that not only are like a bacteria or some kind of bug or creature, more of a human type of creature. In other words, very intelligent and intentional. They all think that they're going to be somehow very superior to us in intelligence. And here's what we have to realize: like there is absolutely zero scientific evidence that that is true or could be true. That is pure conjecture. So to begin with, that whole thought process just it begins with a presumption that is pure conjecture. So anytime you go beyond that presumption, it gets even more conjecture. Back to the conversation I alluded to a minute ago, it went like this. Some people said to me, "Did you know that NASA is working on ways to change the atmosphere and climate on Mars so that we can inhabit Mars? So people can go from Earth to Mars and live in that climate." My response was, well, they can't do that. And their response was, "How do you know they can't change the climate on Mars? Why can't they?" And my response was, "Well, we currently have a planet here that we can inhabit, that we are inhabited, that billions of souls inhabit, that this climate produces hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, and other things. And they cannot even control this atmosphere where we now live, even though they've studied it infinitely more than they'll ever be able to study Mars. Why would they think they can change the atmosphere of Mars when they cannot even control the climate here on Earth? And why not control this one first? If they could, and they're not doing it, shame on them because they're ignoring human suffering. So that's an interesting kind of thing to think about. It's always baffled me, and it should be something we press as much as we possibly can to people that for some reason scientific advancement seems to me to be more important at times than what is before us in these moments. And that can never be the case if we're going to be responsible. One thing we can note and we hear and is a caution about extremes. When we're talking about apologetics and we're talking about creation and we're talking about life on other planets, okay, we're just going to try to avoid two extremes. The first extreme is there's an extreme of ignorance and stupidity married together. Being ignorant only means that we don't have maybe knowledge of a particular thing. Everyone on earth that has ever lived is ignorant on about certain things, about more things than we know about. There's nothing wrong with being ignorant, okay? That's not even a bad word. But stupidity married to it, that's a different thing. Stupidity's taking ignorance and blowing it up as something we're proud of, like saying, "I didn't go to school. I went to the school of hard knocks" on our Facebook profile. Sometimes that's a way of basically saying, I don't really need to know things. The fact is, we do need to know things. We need to realize that science is important and science is invaluable. Most of the people watching this video will absolutely agree with that. So I'm not worried about necessarily those I'm speaking to. But laughing at what we don't know is a thinly veiled defense mechanism. So we should avoid that extreme. But the other extreme is being willing to worship science as man's great achievement and as man's only hope. It is not. The scientist in the lab drowns in the tsunami right alongside the poor man that lives on the beach. Okay, they both drown equally in the tsunami. Human achievement is not possible without a God who makes humans able to achieve anything. In our uniqueness, we're given intelligence by God as part of being made in His image and likeness. And we serve a God and are created by a God that's infinitely intelligent. There will always be limitations to that, though. There are always going to be limitations to science that are present. Sometimes achievement's not as new as we thought it was. I read this on a website this morning, doing a little quick research. A finding on Crete Island, going back to the Minoan civilization, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, has changed our perception about the level of medical knowledge in ancient Greece. The finding was a skull showing the healed marks of a surgery, proving that the patient survived brain surgery. Another skull of a 20-year-old patient was found in northern Greece, and it dated back to 800 BC, and it showed that the patient survived at least 20 years after brain surgery. The surgical operation that took place didn't use a drill, but a special tool sculpting inside the skull in a way that cleared all the debris and fixed the cracks of the skull, a method described in texts of Hippocrates. Another skull that was found in 200 BC belonged to a man 50 years old that had brain surgery using a drilling method. Again, for this patient, the skull was cured while evidence for infection were minimal. The patient survived at least 5 to 6 years after this. So this is a fascinating thing. When we talk about scientific advancement, we need to realize that humankind, as those made in the image and likeness of God, have always been advancing science. We didn't know they were doing brain surgery back then, but now we do, and now we know they're advanced brain surgery and brain surgery that was effective. Can you imagine? I mean, they didn't have the kinds of tools to look inside the head and know what was there ahead of time. I can't even imagine the advancement of just wisdom that they must have compiled in order to do this. So, having said that, knowing that sometimes brain surgeries today are absolutely, they absolutely fail, will show us something that we know that they could succeed 3 millennia before us doing advanced brain surgery, where sometimes they fail today doing advanced brain surgery. And knowing that should give us an understanding that science is good, medical technology is good, all those things serve us, but there's always a limitation to it. And it's never some great crowning achievement that proves that man is ever above God in any kind of way. Man has always been able to use the tools that God has given him to do things. So we need to realize there are always limitations. It seems like every mention of any promising advancement based on a shred of possible evidence will send a naturalist into a state of drooling. Mark Twain said this: "It's amazing how for a small investment of fact one can get such a large return in speculation." So think about that idea that they're saying in 2009, which was now over a decade ago, they found this planet, and that it was probably inhabited. Actually, the article went on to say that it was probably inhabited by flat insects, and nobody, no astronomist, no astrophysicist, nobody had ever even claimed that. That was just the BBC doing that. So I do think it's interesting that they took a speculation of a possibility that we might have found a planet a little bit like ours, and it goes to there, okay? And people ate it up. So the question is, why didn't they say that, they're probably people that live on it, or some kind of more intelligent life than us that lived on it? And the author of this book, Dr. Andrews, points out maybe the possibility of small flat bugs was easier to swallow than the prediction of small green men. And I suspect that is why the BBC made that up. In 1924, when Mars was at its closest proximity to Earth, a 35-hour window was given for complete radio silence across the world. Why? So if any Martian signal were sent, no matter how vague it might be, no matter how faint, it could be picked up. Did it happen? No. Nor has it been any point since then in which radio signals have been received from perceived human or perceived intelligent life from other planets. Not once. And we have spent, over the course of the last 100 years, a good deal of money on this. Not just us, but other planets or other nations. And in fact, actually, in 2015, I believe it was, $100 million was given as a grant to SETA, which is the Search for Intelligent or Extraterrestrial Life, or whatever it is, when they gave that grant, it was supposed to last over 10 years to something that already used to receive funding from NASA. I don't think it does anymore, but also something that is receiving just millions of dollars every year for research. And they continually do this. They're always building things. They're always looking for radio signals of intelligent life. Now they want to drill, and I think there's plans to drill on Mars here in the next few years. And one of the things they said was, we already know that there's not intelligent life. We're just looking for insect life or something. And at this point, we're actually spending money knowing that it's not going to be intelligent life. Now, I think that helps us to see that what we find in the search for intelligent life is based not only on conjecture, but is basically based in this worldview that science and advancement is very important. That's almost our salvation. That's kind of our redemption. That's how we're going to save the planet. Stephen Hawking was one of the most brilliant scientific minds that we can, as far as we can tell, that ever lived. Died just in the last little bit here. And one of the things he said was one of his last videos. There's a 3-minute segment of that video actually on YouTube if you want to look it up. And he warns people on Earth to find a way to leave the planet because it's going to ruin. And this intelligent life that's already out there has already seen us and gotten our number basically, and we need to get away. And that sounds more like Star Trek than it does science, folks. And this is a very intelligent man. There's no doubt about it. But we need to ground ourselves better than that, and we need to not fall for all of those things. I would ask this: why are we spending this kind of money on this kind of thing? Now, look, I believe NASA needs to exist. There's a lot of good reasons for that. Okay, there's no doubt about that. But spending money in the search for intelligent life at the clip in which they are, at this point, is silly. When we have needs currently, 1 in 9 people on planet Earth are hungry. 1 in 9. That is astonishing that we are not trying to solve that problem with that same money, because we're concerned more about life out there than we are life out here. There's a lot to the worldview difference that you find right there, okay? Dr. Andrews, the author of the book, says the reason is curiosity. And he cites George Mallory here when he was asked, why do you want to climb Mount Everest? And he just said this: because it's there. Sometimes curiosity is not a good enough reason. Curiosity is also not a reason when it's married with conjecture, and that forms a new worldview. That's a real problem. As far as intelligent life elsewhere, there's a lot of significant theological implications we need to understand. For the purpose of uniformity and clarity, just for this, when I say alien, and I'm talking right now, I'm saying any intelligent life that exists in another galaxy or on another planet. Okay, so would an alien be made in the image and likeness of God? That is a question we'd have to answer. Certainly, you would think somehow they would be if they were more intelligent than us or as intelligent as us. That would also mean that humans are not very unique in that sense, okay? But also, would the alien be a sinner? Did they fall through Adam? Did they fall on their own planet? If not, are we ever going to meet them? Because they are not fallen, they're holy and perfect, right? If they're not fallen, they can't die. If an alien is not fallen, then death will not occur. And in that sense, then we couldn't defeat them if we had to. That is actually like taking Christian theology and just marching it through this worldview and really examining it, okay? Jesus came as a human for humans. A theological part of the great exchange, this vicarious atonement, this double imputation, was that the second Adam came as the first one did in the flesh and exchanged his righteousness for the unrighteousness of the first Adam, and in the sense represented by sinners, of course. And in that sense, we actually have a human given us redemption. It had to be a human for human thing, okay? So if that's the case, then that redemption certainly wouldn't cover an alien. And so that is something that we need to think about. Why would we even believe there's an alien? That's the biggest question of all. There's not one shred of proof anywhere that's ever existed that aliens actually exist. Now, I realize we have all these silly videos. I know we see these things in the sky, and there's things we can't explain and all the rest. Um, I know what imagination looks like and what conspiracy theory looks like too. And I also know this. I know that there is an odd thing that the same people wanting to fund the search for intelligent life, the same people that want to find it so desperately bad, are saying no, those things aren't intelligent life. Well, if it were, they would be the first on board, okay? There wouldn't be conspiracy theories that we could make up because they're the ones that want to find it. Um, why would we believe there's an alien at all out there somewhere? There is no proof. Is science fiction more appealing to biblical theology? That's what we want to ask. Or are we more concerned about believing science fiction than we are actually building our biblical theology? Is it more believable than biblical theology? You know, when we talk about an intelligent life form that's already watching us, that has our number, that's going to come and take over if we don't get out of here and go to some planet we can't even live on right now, and they want to tell me that what I believe is crazy, I'm going to say right now I'm the one that sounds rational, and that's what sounds like science fiction, because it is science fiction. Okay, there's not a shred of proof that is the case, none whatsoever. Um, so it isn't very believable to me, certainly. Why would God leave the detail of alien life out of the Bible? That's a real question right there. So here's the question. So we find alien life, and now all of a sudden we don't know what to do with the scriptures. I know that there's people who are afraid to say that the scriptures aren't affected by that. They absolutely are. Okay, good theology understands that. A solid theologian, one who has a consistent, coherent worldview in the Christian scriptures, understand that would force us to rethink our entire construct of biblical theology. We don't know what to do with it. Okay? So why would God leave the detail of alien life out there somewhere? Then we find it and we're confused. That's not the way that God works, okay? It's not like he would have forgotten, or oh yeah, I didn't know they were going to find that person, or I didn't know they were going to find this life out there, whatever. He knows everything. He has the future in his hands. He knows the end from the beginning, the scripture says. We have a God who we've already seen in the scriptures as being omniscient, omnipotent, and certainly omnipresent. So that these things help us to see that God didn't leave the detail out and then leave us in the lurch, not knowing what to do with it, okay? So we should realize that everyone who laughs at us for not believing in aliens, yet do not believe God, are what? Hypocrites. Not only that that they're hypocritical in the sense that they believe something they say without a shred of evidence, but there is a shred of evidence. There's an enormity of evidence. One of the evidences, of course, is we throw this back to the resurrection of Christ. I mean, it's Easter week. We're going to be celebrating that resurrection Sunday morning. And if you want to say you're a follower of Christ, you identify with Christianity, you don't believe in the resurrection, then you don't identify with Christianity. That is the linchpin of everything right there. And so we actually have one risen from the dead. Okay, and you have that. If I'm believing this man rose from the dead, then here's what I think. I think all the conjecture that can be written in books you can have, I will take and place my faith on the one risen from the dead, because I already know what that is like, and I see that experience in my own life, and I see that experience in other people's life, the evidence of that, and the way that God changes people and makes them new. What I don't see is alien life forms. And so if I'm going to believe something, that's actually a lot more believable. There's a lot more evidence for the resurrection of Christ. There's a lot more evidence for the Christian faith than there ever will be for alien life forms, okay? And so we need to see that for what it is. But here's what I believe the most telling scripture is in the matter. Job's a great place to go for a little insight into this. And here's why. Job the man who had known so much suffering. He had known so much suffering. He's just struggling to know how to live and breathe. Okay, and the moments of his greatest questioning, he can't find any answers from the friends who were supposed to be his friends, and they give him all this unsolicited, uh, lack of empathy type of advice. It was terrible, right? But here we are in these moments with Job in the text, and God arrives on the scene. Job is having an existential moment. He needs to know the answers, mysteries. He wants to know the whys. He wants to know everything, okay? And you know what happens? God gives him more than enough. And here's the way it's stated. Now I'm going to skip around and Job 38 and 39 to give you a picture of this. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is that darkness? Who is it that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action like a man. I'll question you. You make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Look at the way he says that. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Now, he could have said anything. He could have said the cosmos. He could have said the universe. And he's going to address some of that stuff later. But he starts here. He starts with what is central. Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? What measurements? The foundations of the earth. Surely you know, or who stretched a line upon it, or where its base is sunk, or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy, or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst open from the womb, and when I made clouds its garments and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed limits for it, and set bars and doors, and said, Thus far you shall come, and no further. Here your proud waves should be stayed. Have you commanded the morning, since your days began, and caused dawn to know its place, that it may take hold to the skirts of the earth? And the wicked be shaken out of it. It is changed like clay under the seal. Its features stand out like a garment from the wicked. Their light is withheld. Their uplifted arm is broken. Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Can you bind the chains of Pylades, or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth the Mazzaroth in their season, or guide the bear with its children? Now listen, he's talking about consolations there. And he's not talking about consolations the way he's going to talk about his creatures on earth. He's talking about consolation. So it's not like he forgot to mention the cosmos. They're just, as far as the sky, the earth, the stars, and all that stuff, it's all part of his creation. The earth is where it starts to God, to Job. And so as God describes these things, he starts from the earth. He gives it from the earth's perspective, but he's given it from his perspective. That's an interesting thing. Like God's speaking from his perspective, and he's focusing his attention on earth, okay, more than anything, even though he hasn't forgotten anything else. So if somebody says, well, he's just talking about earth. Well, here he's talking about all the cosmos. He just said it. But he's focusing on earth for a reason. Do you know the ordinances of heaven? Can you establish their rule on, what's he say, earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds that a flood of waters cover you? Can you send forth lightning that you may go and say to you, who we are, here we are? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of does? Can you number the months that they fulfill? And do you know the time when they give birth? And when they crouch and bring forth their offspring and are delivered of their young ones become strong. They grow up in the open. They go out and do not return to them. He's talking about creatures on the earth, okay? Notice in all the answers for the mystery of whys of life and existence, what God's answers contain and what they do not contain. He refers to his creation. He puts himself over it and the earth as the place of his creatures. He speaks of consolations in the sky, but his impersonal creation that he binds together, that he holds together while the things on earth move about and reproduce. The rest of it doesn't. That means that all this, everything we need to know, our existential problem is solved by God right here, telling us that the earth is where he created creatures in the way in which he did, and human creatures to be the crown of the creation, who are the ones who can ask this question and have this question answered. I would think this would have been a good place to reveal some mystery of alien life somewhere. But God doesn't do that. He's uninterested. Or it's simply not there, one of the two, right? And if something can be created without him, think about this. If he's not talking about it because it's not his creation, well, if there's something else that can be created that's not created by him, he's comparable to something else. He's comparable to something else. Or he might be inferior to that God that would create something else. A God among other creators. And yet he makes no bones. We see in the New Testament testimonies like John and Colossians saying nothing was made that was not made by him, through him, and for him. Christ being the agent of that creation. And so as Christ is agent of creation, he's the agent of redemption. As Adam was the crown of his creation, he's also the focus of his redemptive purposes, okay? Biblical revelation and biblical theology have to mean more to us than naturalist conjecture and alien conspiracy theories. And I mean, it may sound like it's harsh, but that is a logical conclusion that you get from biblical theology. Christian theology does not deal with the existence of aliens any more than it deals with the existence of leprechauns and pixies, because it's a fruitless thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to deal with what doesn't exist. It isn't even agnostic on the issue. It's not like the Bible claims that it doesn't realize maybe these things. We shouldn't be agnostic on the issue. I think we should say, as far as we know, the earth and humanity and the redemptive purposes of God, all of it's found within what we know. That we don't have all these mysteries out there that include intelligent life that concern us in any way as Christians. And that's certainly not been our call. We are not called to go to the ends of the galaxies with the gospel. We're called to go to the ends of this earth as it is. So the creative and redemptive works of God are actually understood and interpreted by those made in the image and likeness of God as descendants of Adam, and that's us, okay? I do find it curious why the existence of demons and angels are so easily waved off by people who believe in aliens. And I do think that is an interesting thing. You know, you're going to tell me there's no demons or or angels, but boy, you believe in angels and aliens just like that. Well, I'm really curious as to how that can happen. I believe God has blinded the hearts of those seeking any other answers but him. If that's the case, then he's blinded their hearts to see the truth, and even when it's very reasonable and rational. On this issue of intelligent life on other planets, when we say we do not believe that, there's no evidence for it. Nobody should be calling us irrational for that, because there isn't any evidence for it. Okay? I could be wrong here, but a worldview based on Scripture is the one I'm presenting. And if we find aliens, yes, I do believe that it would cause a restructuring of a biblical worldview. But I'm going to cling to Christ as my hope, because unlike Stephen Hawking, I don't think I need to prepare to go to another planet for my salvation. I think my salvation is found in Christ, and I think I am preparing for another world. It's just not some planet 5 billion light years away. I think it is the one that Christ spoke of, a new heaven, a new earth that will be descending, and those in Christ will be given reign and rule with him there. And so that's the one that I choose as a biblical worldview. That's the way we must choose. So I am going to post a short video. It's just like 1:06 or something like that. It's a link after I post this, and I will hope you might just click on that link. It's kind of funny to watch, because what's going to happen is you just have about 5 biblical theologians on the stage, and somebody's basically asked them, do you believe in life on other planets? Do you believe the Bible leaves that door open? And it takes them about a minute to just wave that off, because it's a needless conversation for a Christian theologian. In fact, it would be much akin to saying, let's talk about leprechauns. Why couldn't there be leprechauns? Do we really need to even answer that question? So I do think it's a fun video to watch. And also, if you want to see that Stephen Hawking video, just do something in the comments to let me know once I post this, and I can always link that to here, and that is an interesting thing to see the view of somebody who truly is a very was a very intelligent scientist. There's no question about that, but yet has almost a Star Trek type of view when it comes to this issue. Um, so anyway, I hope y'all have a good afternoon. I'll see you here tomorrow afternoon. Again, this might be something that's not the most exciting stuff to everyone, and I realize this isn't everybody's cup of tea, but it's the point of apologetics that we're talking about right now. And by the end of the week, we'll probably move on to some other stuff for sure. So just hang in there and keep watching, and maybe you'll just learn some things. And even if you were to disagree with me, maybe it would cause you to think about some things in a way that you never have, and that's always good. So we love you and have a great afternoon.